what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another special episode. Today, she's back. That's right. Back in the building. We're going to have another conversation with the Virtuoso Educator, Kylie. I don't know if you go by Elizabeth at all.
Yes. Kylie Elizabeth.
Kylie Elizabeth. She's in the building today, y'all. What's up?
Round 3. How's it going?
How you been doing?
I'm good. Just really getting through a lot of stuff. As we talked about, just really been promoting and taking your advice on how to promote my business, Virtuoso Education Consulting Services, as well as just really ramping up my personal podcasting with educational people and parents and things like that. So just really been behind the scenes a lot, doing a lot of work, pushing through some events these last few months. And the last time we podcasted was in December.
Yeah.
And so since then, we had the Black History Month celebration, then been doing some monthly markets. So just always on the go. So
Yeah.
a lot.
Your episode you did with me was pretty popular. Like, I had some people respond and comment on the post.
Yes.
And not a lot of people comment on my stuff. It just kind of floats out there in the ether.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the conversation around cultural responsiveness.
Yes.
Sparked a little bit of people. It rubbed them up a little bit.
Yeah. That's a hot topic in education right now. This one's a hot button. Cultural responsiveness and anything around culture around the United States is such a huge topic of conversation. And depending on what side of the fence you're on, and the lens that you are looking at this topic, you're going to agree or disagree on them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so for the post that you're talking about, I got called racist, which I thought was pretty interesting. As a biracial woman who comes from both lines of the fence, as a white and black person, to be called racist, I've never been called that, so I thought was very interesting. And so the comment stated, she must be a woke person coming from the Democratic Party to promote their DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, which, I wasn't offended. I was very that's interesting, for the first time being called racist ever in my life.
And they also appropriately know the acronyms.
Yes.
How do you know that? And because that means you're a little bit educated.
Yes.
But not educated?
Yeah.
What's going on?
And it was hard to say, I think right now in technology, it's really hard to understand if it's a bot or if it's an actual person.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, because even the name of the person was, and you clicked on their profile, they didn't have anything up. But at the same time, it's one, I'm flattered that you think that I'm a person that's been recruited by a Democratic Party to promote DEI. That means that you think I'm very well versed in the conversation that I'm having, which was a great compliment. But at the same time, it's people are confusing racism with the lines of culture and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
When at the same time, DEI is for everyone, but it is to ensure that everybody is getting the same equal access to everything. And, this is really opening a can of worms right now in the United States is, I don't know if many of you are familiar, but Florida just their legislation just passed that you're no longer able to use federal funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, supports, things like that in the educational institution. And so the first college to do it, University of Florida, shut down their DEI offices. They had fired 15 employees and 13 additional staff. It might be flipped around the other way. But basically, they had to move that funding that they were given for diversity, equity, and inclusion into other programs because no longer in Florida are you able to spend federal funding on DEI. And to me, that's, and Missouri is starting to take heed of that and kind of doing the same thing. Yeah. And so from a structural level, top, working their way down, you're making it hard now for people to have these resources, to have a Black student union, to talk about certain cultural, even LGBTQ, all the different subpopulations, right, that we have in the United States, are housed under DEI. And I feel like people they're utilizing a really interesting tactic that I find is called reverse racism.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Like, are you studying their side of it to kind of understand like how to rebuttal this and understand their point of view?
Yeah.
Because I guess you got to kind of understand your enemy, quote unquote, and know where they're coming from when you engage in their conversation. So really you want to take someone's bad idea and replace it with a good idea. And so you got to understand how they got that bad idea. Like, where did you come up with this?
Right.
With that though, what have you learned? Like you said something about reverse racism.
Yeah.
Like how are they coming up with that?
So it's not about how they come up with it. It's all everything that we use, especially in propaganda. And if you look at like old war techniques and things like in flyers, it's or persuasive techniques of how to get people to either lead towards what you're saying or the other person is saying. Are you attaching at the heartstrings? Are you doing something that's a personal story? Are you doing something that's attached to money, right? And all of these things. And unfortunately, when we look, when we combine education with politics, this is where we're seeing problems. Because at the end of the day, everybody should have, all students, no matter what they look like, where they're at, should have the same type of equal opportunity, equal education, equal structure in their educational systems, their schools, all these things. But then to answer your question, a tactic that they're looking at with reverse racism is they're basically saying DEI is not including the white conscious Caucasian population. They think it's a subcategory, or we're excluding the white population because we're not therefore celebrating white and Caucasian. So in turn, we're being racist. Okay. And but then you got to think about it when we're looking in a full scale context. Who has majority of control over the United States, right? What population of people? When you look, and we talked a little bit about this last time, when you look in our history books, like what is being depicted, how and who is highlighted in all the good ways is typically the white or Caucasian European demographics in those books. And you don't ever get to learn, again, the good and the bad about that population. You only see the good. So
I feel like we've been studying white culture.
Yes.
Like I remember being in Black Student Union in high school, and some of my white associates would be like, well, why isn't there a white student union? And I'd be like, well, explain to me white culture.
Right.
Like Black Student Union, we have these things to learn Black history and Black culture. I feel like we're already doing that every day here, learning about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and all these. I think Abraham Lincoln was Black, by the way. But learning about all these different white figures in history. And then, when we pull their statues down, they don't like that as well. But some of them were not very good people. Yeah. And we have to also come look at ourselves in the face and be like, do we want to celebrate this type of person? Right. That was doing these things?
And that's the thing. Yeah. And it's like, and again, and it's not saying that every white person is bad. It's not saying that whatever person is bad, because there's good, like we said, there's good and bad coming from all cultures. So again, it is how it's depicted. How are we allowed to elaborate and have conversations around? A prime example, and I don't remember if I talked about this with you or another person, but and this is a big thing here in Arizona, is the Holocaust, right, is now in legislation to have to be taught in schools, right? Yeah. Why are we talking about the Holocaust? Because it was a genocide of people. It was a hate story, right? You're talking about somebody who's controlling a certain group of people, but when you look at the Holocaust, again, this is from a whole separate country. It's not even happening within the United States, but we are supposed to learn of it, right? A lot of people did migrate here because of the Holocaust, which does tie us to it. But why is it okay to highlight this group of people when we're talking about the Jewish community, when we're talking about, Nazis and things like that from different cultures? But when it comes to Black history, when we're talking about slavery, when we're talking about all these things, it's not okay to talk about, because is it not a genocide of people? Yeah. Is it not slavery encampment? Like, is it, so why is it okay to talk about this, but not this? in our world.
I feel like it's accountability.
Yeah.
Like, just to keep it short and sweet.
Yeah.
If you got to look at yourself in the face for what you did and actually have a, I forget the word for it, but essentially it means like atonement for your crime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think in short, that won't happen because that triggers so many other things from us, like not getting land.
Yeah.
like
reparations
to like Jim Crow era shit and just the whole train wreck up to like the criminal system and zoning and shit right now that we're in. So you know, it's a story that we got to tell. I don't know. Do you feel like it should be up to the schools to tell that story, to tell the story of the atrocities that have happened in the world? Or I guess also at what level should we give that information to students? Like, when is it appropriate to tell a student, like, hey, there were a lot of people hurt, like murdered?
Well, that's a loaded question. So obviously, the more graphic and detailed information comes, the older the student should be, right? And again, we talked about this. A lot of foundational cultural pieces have to happen at home, like as a whatever. If you're in, you're Japanese, like you're talking about, Hiroshima, you're talking about all of those things that happened in your culture and your family. Same thing, like Jewish talking about the Holocaust, but then you're Black, we're talking about slavery. Like every subculture has had some type of something, and therefore that is up to the families to have those conversations and discussions. But where it comes, like when we're introducing people, like historical figures, like in schools, and like these types of contexts, you need to have overarching representation of who are these figures that we're talking about. And then if you're connecting historical stories, right, about wars, about even when we're talking about World War I or World War II, they don't tell you that the first line of defense was Black people. Because what happens in the first line of defense? You're the first group to be shot down first. Yeah. Right? But they don't tell you that. And it's not to say that the Black people were more important than the others, but you always hear of historical war figures of the white descent. Like you don't get the full picture. Yeah. So where it is a fine line of, it depends on by grade level how you're learning, but you need to include all populations that were involved and don't just give the high reward, high recognition to one subset of group of people. Yeah. And that's what we tend to see.
Well, Elizabeth, all that sounds very racist to me. So I do want to, because we're going to talk about events, we're going to get to that. But you mentioned something that was interesting to me, that you do come from a multiracial background. Yeah. So what has that experience been for you, like in the United States? And do you ever have the two worlds come to head where like maybe this side of your family believes in something that is like contradictory to like your existence? Like, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right.
So as a biracial woman in the United States, and I will say probably up to this year, I'm 34 this year. I'll be 35 this year, but identity has been the biggest issue for me. And it's like, where do I fit in and who do I fit in with? And as somebody of multiple races, right, I can fit in anywhere. I do pride myself as having, being friends with everybody. Like I don't, male, female, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. I had multitude of friends, like, and you would always see me with a diverse population of people. And I think a lot of my friends too were biracial, so I think it kind of naturally happened that way. But I've felt I've actually had things happen to me that were, indicators, a lot of why I'm in education anyways, a lot why I think racism and diversity, equity, inclusion is a big part of my my educational journey. But I'll give you some examples. So my very first instance of racism in school, I think I talked about this last time. I would say real quick, 4th grade, we were doing state standardized testing. They said, this is pen and paper at the time. What race are you? Only check one. Okay, you didn't have biracial, multicultural was not an option when I was in 4th grade at the time. And so I raised my hand to my teacher, who was probably mid 40s, early 50s white man. Hey, Mr. C, like, I'm all of these. Which one do I check? And he's like, well, you live with your mom, right? And I'm like, yes. He's like, your mom is white, isn't she? I'm like, yes. He's like, so you're white. And I'm like, oh, but I'm not, though. I'm like, so what do I do? Check, black, white, native, because, you know, Native Indian, and as well. And so I checked all three. And then, so that was an instance for me in schools. And what a lot of people don't understand was back in the day, they used to, so say if you were biracial, right? And you were higher performing. So for me as a student, as a biracial, that was higher performing in academics. They wanted me to be labeled white. So then the white students look like they're outperforming black students. Had I been poor in my academics, put black. You know what I mean? And they used to do that. And there's research on that. You guys can look that up. And then another instance was even friends. So I just vividly remember my elementary school years, 5th grade. I was friends with, she was a Hispanic girl. And she mainly lived with her mom and dad were in 2 separate households. Her dad, who was white, I believe, she was mixed as well. He was, you know, I used to go to her house, hang out and play because she was around the corner, no problems. But then one time she's like, hey, do you want to sleep over at my mom's house? So her mom was Hispanic. She had a stepdad who was Hispanic. Well, stepdad found out that I was black. I was no longer able to be her friend. Oh, wow. I couldn't talk to her. She wouldn't talk to me at school anymore. Nothing. So then, you know, so then I was like, dang, like, you know, that really, And so it was a girl that I hung out with like a lot. And then I got to middle school, and middle school was the start of, well, what are you? Are you white or are you black? Like, and you know, I always, and still to this day, like with my voice, they're like, you talk like a white girl. Like, well, I'm sorry that I use like high frequency, like educational verbs and words and all these things. And it's like, and it's not about the tone of or inflection of being white and by culture. It is more of like dialect. Where are you from? And then the words that you're using. And so that's where people kind of get that, you know, mixed up too. So I've always dealt with that through middle school and high school of like not really feeling like I belonged in some type of group. And girls wanted to fight me in high school. Like, you're like, who are you? Like, you're a white girl. I'm like, you can't call me one thing when I'm both. Like, you can't say I'm one over the other. Now, I will say I was raised primarily by both sides of my family because I was with my dad usually every other week. Again, my dad's black. And but my dad, and no shade, Dad, sorry if you're watching this, but my dad is a more like, I'll say more affluent to the white culture. And then my mother, who was white, was more affluent to the black culture. So when I lived with, off and on with my mother, but I was raised by my mother's mom, so my grandmother. So my white grandmother, I was raised in that with her in her home, but she also lived in the black community. So I went to school in our black community in Kenosha, Wisconsin, like Lincoln Park, for those of you who are familiar. But so it's like I was primarily in the black culture. Like my friends mostly were black. I've always related more to my black culture than I did to my white culture. I don't like country music, and I know country music is for everything, but like now we're taking back over the country music, but I hate country music. Why? There's a story to that. So I went to, if anybody knows, Country Thunder, which is a popular country music concert that travels. And so I was with, at the time, my best friend, who was a white girl. She was at my wedding many years later. You know, we were friends ever since high school. And I went to Country Thunder with her and her parents. And, you know, probably my hair was probably like curly like this at that time before I started straightening it. And just walking around, minding my business with her. And all of a sudden, this drunk man comes up to me, white man, and he looks me straight in the face. And sorry if you have to bleep this out later, but he's like, so do you love niggers? Literally, I'm 13 years old. No, all these people around me, he comes right to my face and asks me this question. And I, like, at that time, I was like more aware and understanding of racism and what it looks like and when people are trying to antagonize you. So I kind of like went off on him a little bit, like my little 13-year-old self. And, you know, security ended up kicking him out. because I told them what happened. But it's like, you know, you kind of like dealt with that here and there. And, you know, I feel like in certain essences, as somebody who is multicultural, who looks a certain way, like, you know, there's always been the thing in the Black community where, you know, you're light skinned, but you think about slavery, like if I was born in that time, I would be in the house versus being in the shack, you know, because of what I look like and, you know, those types of things. So it does really go like those types of issues are very deep rooted because of these conversations, how they evolve over time. And then it's like, when I moved here to Arizona and I'm like, okay, I really want to build community and get in with my community. And I know that I, by heart and foundationally, like relate more to the Black community and want to do initiatives within this community of people. I'm like, okay, let me get into this group and this group and this group. But then once I started being involved, you kind of see like, for Black people only. So then I question, well, am I going to be looked at as only a Black person? And am I going to be looked at as a white or biracial person and that I might not fit in this group? What I've learned over time is as I became, even within this last year, more comfortable with my own identity and really embracing who I am as a person. You know, I went from flat ironing my hair because that's what I was used to, like in high school, not embracing my curls, to the last 3 years, you know, starting over, letting my stuff grow out. Like I love my hair and embracing just being myself. But myself is biracial. And so a lot of people, even as I've talked and had these conversations, they're like, well, you know, by genome, Black takes over precedence of anything anyways. And so, but I'm like, you know, sometimes it's kind of hard to say that because by definition of my genes, I am a mixture of all the things that I am. So, you know, just being identified as a biracial woman, but I do, you know, I don't, for lack of better terms, call myself a Black woman.
It sounds like those experiences led you to your profession, kind of what you're doing today. Especially with you working to put on Black History Month events and things like that. And you know, I've had some experience. Well, I've had quite a bit of experiences. So I grew up on like a military base, which is very like conservative, very country, very like for America. And like occasionally I would have, you know, racist confrontation because I did have an eclectic group of friends. But, you know, unfortunately, I learned racism from the adults. You know what I mean? Like when you're a kid, you don't really think about that thing. Even if it is actually racist, because I do remember like kids making fun of other kids just for them being really dark or being really pale or whatever. But it wasn't really racist. It's because they were different looking, right?
Not used to being around those other
of those complexions and such. And yeah, it sounds like those events kind of led you into being the type of person you are. You mentioned that, you know, in your 34 years of life, you've recently became more comfortable in your identity. And how did you find that comfort? Was it you know, researching your community or just being a part of a community? Like, how did you find that more, get that peace there?
I think and again, it depends on how you're raised, right? You know, and I can speak for like me being the oldest of 8, like all of my siblings, most of us are all biracial except for my one of my stepbrothers. He is completely white, but you know, he's been involved with us for 20 plus years. My dad and stepmom have been together. So for me, again, it does come from the experiences that I've had, and I am so vocal into this. But I think at the end of the day, it's where I feel comfortable, and where I feel the most accepted. Because even though I am right, and on the flip side, in the white community, I'm not white. I'm Black, or I'm biracial. I'm not pure in the sense, right? I don't have blonde hair and blue eyes. And, you know, I even joke about like most of my sisters all have hazel eyes. I'm like, dang, even if I got like hazel eyes, it might have, you know, a little bit of an outcome. But where I noticed pushback a lot, and even for personal advancement in my career, I've always got pushback from my white peers. And most scenarios. My Black peers have been the ones to push and promote and encourage all of those things. So then, and then when I came here, and like I said, when people are like, no, you fit in, like, you're fine, you know, that just be you and just, you know, don't think about it. And so it's kind of where I'm like, okay, I do feel comfortable. Nobody has come to me as a 30-year-old and be like, why are you here? Like, you know, you don't belong in this group of people. And I feel like even in the Black community, even though they know and can visibly see that I am mixed, which a lot of people mistake me for Puerto Rican or Dominican anyways. It's like, I'm not that at all. You know, I don't feel outcasted in a sense. I don't feel like people are like looking at me like you don't belong here. And I've not felt that, but I've been in spaces as an educator, like I'm on a national group, and I knew this last year when I went, and it happened again this year. I went in January, that I would be the only person of color in that room, and I was. But what do I get to do? I get to speak on it and talk about it, and they're ironically talking about DEI and updating some stuff on a national level. Well, you guys can talk all you want, but this is my experience as a person of color. And I didn't feel excluded from this room, but there are some eyes that are like, oh, she's one of those. Like, she's going to come in here and disrupt, like, what we have going on. And I do feel that in a professional level and the things that I talk about, I can be a disruption sometimes, which can get me in trouble. But
I'm not going to lie, like, there was some weirdness growing up, being like the only Black kid in the classroom. Because honestly, sometimes people would just like me because I was the Black kid in the classroom. And even some of my confrontation came from that. Like, oh, he must think he's something. He must, you know, it's like I walked in with my junk swinging out. Like, no, I'm like, I'm one of you guys. You know what I mean? But that's not the case. And they'll let you know. They'll let you know, like, hey, you're not one of us. You're different. And especially in terms of like trying to fit in. I would say middle school, probably like 5th grade to middle school is really when like identity starts setting in. And you start kind of feeling that like microaggression of like stare, glances, I don't like you. And in my study of psychology and just personality, is like, oh, this person's acting like their parent. They're acting like their uncle. They're acting like their older brother and sister. You know, they're mimicking this behavior. At that age, though, I didn't know it. I was just like, they're just an asshole. They're just born that way. They're just born to be jerks. You know what I mean? Sometimes. But
it really doesn't. You mentioned too, you know, like when you're little, you don't think about it. And I know everybody's seen the commercial or even the meme or the video of you have the Black and white child. As children, they're playing no problem, nothing, right? And they just love it. Like, we're all, I think, born naturally, like, just nurturers and loving and caring individuals. And it's we are what we're our surroundings, you know, any environment. So if we are in a household that doesn't embrace everyone and thinks you are above or higher than because of your race, you know, then you're gonna have these continuous, repetitious issues around race and around things, instead of people be like, okay, we're all people, we're all like all of these things. And not to say, and please, I want people to know, it's not just the white community that does this to others. It is all things, because I've even had to correct some people in my Black community. Like, you guys can't expect equality and equal opportunity and if you can't do it the other way around. Because we do see a lot. But again, there are places and times to be like, this is for us, this is blah, blah, blah. But let us do that. But you got to understand that you still have to be culturally accepting of other people.
I'm happy you said that, because our community, like the Black community, can be very conservative. And so like my point of views on some of the things, you mentioned groups earlier, right? We were talking about groups, different groups on Facebook. I don't particularly like groups. I understand that I'm naturally a part of these groups. What I more so look to do is seek to fix the issues of the things that are going to directly affect me and the people that I'm associated with.
Right.
And I'm naturally a Black person.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be Black my whole life.
Yeah.
And we have these issues that the Black community are facing, right? Mm-hmm. If I was an Asian person, I'd be working on issues in the Asian community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And being an ally to the Black community. So with that, though, sometimes there are different echo chambers and group thinks. And, you know, someone will say something that I don't agree with in a particular group. And I'll be like, hey, I don't subscribe to that particular thing right there. You know what I mean? And it can come around, you know, how we treat other people from demographics, sexualities, genders, things like that, right? I think what you're doing is phenomenal because I think education and dialogue is what's going to bring people up to the next level of being able to communicate and express themselves in these, I guess, tough conversations. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, you may not agree on it, and a lot of times people don't agree on it because they have their indoctrinations. Right. And that's fine. Well, I don't know if it's fine, but it is what it is. Yeah. But at the same time, like, if we can communicate so that there's not a law in place where someone is directly affected by someone else's belief system. You know what I mean? So that's really what I strive for, is like, don't let tribalism or your support of something affect someone else in a negative way. Sure. Like, being pro-Black is not anti-white. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that these dialogues are necessary. I want to pivot right now, though, because I want to talk about the event that you put on in February. Mm-hmm. It's March right now, by the way.
A month later.
Happy St. Patrick White People Day. I was like,
man. See, look at us being racist. Just kidding.
Happy St. Patrick Day. I think today's St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, today's the 17th. Yeah,
it is for sure. Oh, I just guessed. Yes. I just guessed that, and I was like,
National Women's Month.
Oh, National.
Yes, it's March.
Shout that out too.
Yep. So we're doing a lot. Yeah. So it's been a month since the Black History Month celebration. And it's so interesting. So again, I love event planning. I do event planning for a couple different organizations. I will be doing some small events myself around educational topics and around some type of like sisterhood, women's type stuff putting together. But anyway, so kind of coming back. So February 17th, it was the 4th annual Black History Month celebration. It went really well. I think it's so funny because a lot of people don't think of like the mishaps that could happen at events. And, you know, and a lot of what's funny is like a lot of people don't know the behind the scenes, like what actually takes to curate and put together some type of event. And, you know, as a planner, you try to like think of all these things. Long story short, we had a mishap with our bathroom. Our bathroom literally took a shit. And so you have a big event with a lot of people and our bathrooms are down. Like that's, you know, and then of course everybody at one time was like, I have to use the bathroom. We had to call a plumber in the middle of our event, which is not good, and sewage backing up into the parking lot. Like, I'm so sorry to the vendor that had to deal with that. But, you know, you can only control what you can control. The other thing too is like if you're doing, so we did like a block party type, I would just advocate, you know, make sure you guys have everything down and locked in and confirmed, because our barricade people that were supposed to come and block off the street at 9 a.m. were late. And so we have an active street with traffic coming through that's supposed to be blocked off so our vendors could set up. And so that became like a dangerous situation and things like that because they were 2 hours late. And so, but we, you know, had to keep going type of thing. So we're trying to monitor as it went. And then I think the other thing too is like planning if people can't come at the last minute. When you're doing like big vending events and things like that, you know, weirdly, I had a couple of people like, I had a flat tire and I got a car. One of my performers got in a really bad car accident that day. He's good, you know, thank goodness. But you know, you kind of have to just plan and navigate around those types of things. But I think outside of that, a very great turnout. Again, I had about 40 vendors, minus the one performer that didn't come. I had 7 performers, a mix of a poet, a singer. We had a little kids dance group, which was really cute, and remind me to talk about something about that in a minute. And then just some community speakers that wanted to address the community on good topics and stuff. And so it went really well. I think a really good day, and again, the networking is the biggest key of these types of events, is, you know, promoting your business, and then so people can really like get to know you and things like that. So I think it went really well overall.
That's amazing. I have an idea for an event that I want to throw at you.
Yeah.
I just like throwing my ideas out and see what happens. So,
Sure.
But tell me about the little kids performing.
Oh yeah. So I was talking about this on my podcast with somebody. So if you think about like if your child is in elementary, or they're doing like the little choir at the elementary school, or if they're doing like a little dance, like show and tell thing, right? Mm. The smaller the kids are, the more people are going to come. Yeah. You ever notice that? Yeah. And so we were having the conversation on this podcast about how kids get older, we kind of back up and relinquish our support, I suppose, because we know that they can do it themselves. So people are less likely to show up as they're getting older because of the maturity. Yes. But you tend to see like packed out theaters for like dance things for these little cute little kids dancing on the stage, right? But as they're getting older, you might see less and less people show up to that. Yeah. And so what happened at the event, right, and was we had, I can't think of it's so sorry, I can't think of the dance team off the top of my head. But we had a little dance team come, and there were little girls, probably like 4 and 5 year olds, like really cute, doing like their beginning dance skills. But it was the people that came with them was like actually like 45, 50 extra people. Wow. But they weren't there earlier and they didn't stay.
Oh, okay.
So got to the event. Yeah. So my point is why do we only support the littles, and we don't continue the support for our families and our children and stuff as they're growing and getting older? Because all of these businesses have family and friends that are supposed to be on. Even me personally, I'm like, okay, I have, I shared with you earlier, I have 53 people lined up on my podcast, but not one, friends and family are not friends and family. Yeah. Like, where's the support? You know what I mean? So I found it interesting that, the support when it comes to us as adults and us as trying to promote our business, we tend to get the support from those outside of our friends and family before we do our closest people to us.
That's an interesting observation there. Yeah. I think that you're spot on, because when I go to my children's school functions where they're singing holiday songs, the thing is packed.
Standing room only.
Standing room only. And they're saying some Christmas shit I don't even like.
Right. Exactly.
Hey, good job.
Supporting the kids.
Supporting the kids. Mm-hmm. But as they get older and, maybe high school age and et cetera, like we may go to whatever event they're in.
Yeah, basketball games.
Basketball games, sports games. But if they're putting on like a show or a concert or something, it's like everyone attending that with the same enthusiasm. You know what I mean? Like, I do think you're onto something, how that kind of fades out the older the person gets, at least with family and friend support. Devil's advocate though, I do get it though, because when my children would perform and when they were done, I was like, I don't need to see nothing else there.
Yep, time to go.
I was like, hey, that was it for me. Thanks. If anything, I'm gonna buy my kids like something from one of these vendors here. It was like a chocolate marshmallow puff thing. All right, y'all can have that, and we're gonna bounce. Yeah. So I do get that though. Yeah, I do get it.
So it was real interesting, to kind of talk about that. But again, just real quick.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say it's important just to track from that podcast. We talked about like middle school's prime. Like you need to dedicate your time to those kids in that transition period from elementary to middle. And then as they're transitioning from middle to high school and continuing that support. Because the older they get, they actually do need more guidance.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I have a teenager at home and I'm like, in this weird phase where like before you just kind of liked your kids regardless. Yeah. But now like, my daughter watches my podcast. Like sometimes like I am at odds with her. Like, why are you thinking this way and acting this way? And I want to like you as a person, but you're making it difficult for me. Yeah. But all that aside, I still need to parent her on making good choices. And it's really like having like an adult in your house with a funky attitude.
Yeah. Yes, that was oh my gosh, me and my 11-year-old, and please tell me it so I don't talk too much, but me and my 11-year-old, we got into it this week. She's going through her change and all those things, and her attitude has been a little extra, and so we had to have a conversation. I had to put her in her room this weekend. No, we are not doing this. But she vocalized. She's very vocal, but she is very hyper emotional. She has been her whole life. Yeah. But she was like, I feel this way and this way. Okay, great. Thank you for telling me how you feel. But I feel, kind of having those back and forth dialogues. But then, of course, embracing okay, I'm sorry I made you feel this way. We do as parents have to take ownership sometimes because, again, like I said, I'm behind my computer all day, and so maybe she feels a little less attended to and all these things, and kind of her brother gives her a hard time, but kind of when we're talking about parenting and raising and going back into how are you influencing your children based on racial conversations, and I just posted that my daughter had an app in her phone, and it's similar to Instagram, but it's creating your like an avatar and running your platform, your posts and stuff through an avatar model. Mm-hmm. This girl was following 455 people and had 1.4 thousand followers.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. What is this?
On a social app?
A social
so they can talk to each other.
Yes.
Oh, no.
But one of her posts was something of her avatar choking out this other avatar and saying something about racist. And I'm like, oh, so then yesterday too, it was a conversation about something about racist. And I'm like, Raina, so it occurred to me that my daughter is a little too woke for her age. She's very aware of things. And, again, she went to an all black, elementary school for a couple of years. Yeah. So she's very knows herself and knows her identity, but sometimes she can confuse certain things for being racist or things like that. So I have to then as a parent correct that because you can't go around just calling everybody racist because then I told her now it looks like you're racist. So it's having those open conversations. Yeah. It's really interesting. But these kids, man, middle school,
everything's racist to them or someone's being a Karen.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep.
What a tip that I do, and maybe other parents can do this as well. So in those moments, those heated moments where you're having a conversation with your kids, aka trying not to strangle body slam them with your latest wrestling move and throw them in the. So when you're in those type of conversations, I remember being 11, 12, 13, and it is kind of hard to really focus in and sit down and emotionally have a conversation with your parent. So talk with your kid as much as they can receive at the time. Yeah. But then the next thing that I do when things are calmer and your kid is happy, bring back that same conversation because it's going to snap them right back to hey, remember that time you was losing your shit yesterday? Yeah. We were talking about that thing. Yeah. And they're going to be oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, let's talk about that. Right? So you bring it back again when they're happy. Yeah. And then bring it back a third time again, just out of the blue. Because it really has to sit in and resonate with them. Yeah. So whatever you're, arguing about, sometimes give it space, let it breathe. Yeah. Come to a point where things are calmer for sure. Yeah. Bring it back when they're happy because they're going to ask you for some shit. They always do. Hey, can you do this for me? Yeah, I'd be yeah, now you want me. Okay. Yeah, no, and they do that too. And then so I have to remind my kids all the time. It's so as the mother, I feel I get treated the worst. By my kids sometimes, and they'll be out in public and they're like, you got the best kids, but I'm well, glad they're good here because at home I can strangle both of them sometimes, and that's been, I talked about this in our very first episode, that's my children and the way that we are and just functionally are, it's just, we have this interesting dynamic, but treating your children as if you were to treat a relationship, if you're going to invest a lot of time in therapy with your spouse and, or if you're, fighting and that you don't function well in conversations and while you're heated or while you're upset or crying, your kids are 20 times worse than that because they're not adults and have developed brains enough to digress and chill. So especially with my son that's autistic and 8, he has a harder time processing some things. So if you're freaking out, okay, I'm gonna let you freak out for a little bit.
once you chill, then we're going to come back. I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah.
And so, but everybody's parenting style is a little bit different. But you definitely need to talk. Like my kids, I have very open conversations. Me and my daughter were talking about a C-section yesterday.
Oh.
We had this, and she's 11. We had to talk about, sex and all these things. And I just be like, they have this and we have this. Think about it. She's like, what? Like, oh no. And like, so we've kind of been building on conversations. And of course, it's up at your comfortability. But I think the more we, especially because of technology and how much these kids are seeing day to day, like we have to prepare them. Like, oh, they might be talking about sex, but do you really know what this means and like what this looks like? Because on that app my daughter was just on, they had like a smash or pass.
Oh my gosh.
Group. I'm like, whoa, do you know what smash means? And she's looking at like, she's like, I don't know. And like, I don't know if that means yes or no.
Yeah.
But I'm like, we're referring to sex. She's like, I didn't know. I was like, well, this is the dangers of being in social media. Like So me and Dad deleted that immediately off her phone. Like and now we're back to absolutely no YouTube, no nothing. And now I'm checking her phone every week.
Yeah.
Like
that's the thing. Like you do want to gauge your child's maturity for handling certain things.
Yeah.
But generally, like social media before teenage years, and even during teenage years, is just going to be a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
I do understand that you're a busy lady and you got to run here. I appreciate you coming back on the show today.
Absolutely.
Can you tell everyone where they can find you, connect with you, social media? And
absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at the Virtuoso Educator. VIRTUOSO educator. So again, I'm doing my podcast on YouTube, and then I share my content on Instagram and Facebook, and then I'm working on my website but I do have services, again, administrative services if anybody needs some help there, and then my Linktree at the Virtuoso Educator will have some additional contact information.
Awesome. All right, everyone. I'm going to drop her link below in the description. Make sure you click on it, follow her platform. And thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you. Have a good night, guys. Repeat the voice song. I don't know. I can't remember. One